Patrick?
Hey, Michael J. What's up?
What is up? There was just a Mythic Championship this past weekend.
True.
Like 3 days ago or something. It was completed in Richmond, Virginia.
Yes. The most lopsided, like the most homogeneous Pro Tour of all time.
That is some nice stuff. So Brian David Marshall, the Pro Tour historian emeritus, actually texted me from Richmond. He came back to do coverage this week, even though theoretically he's retired. He said, "Hey, what was Pro Tour Rebels at?" I was like, looked it up, 43%.
Yeah, not even close.
Any guess what Once Upon a Time was at this one?
73%.
75.76%.
Oh, that's right. It was 73% of all copies of Once Upon a Time that could get played were played. Because there were a few people that were playing 3.
Yeah, some of those crazy folks were in the top 8 at only 3 Once Upon a Time. This could have been it. This could have been the break, for like a dominant instant. There could have been a 32, but no. I think that maybe multiple people did not play 4. Although it was present in all 8 decks of the final 8 at this Mythic Championship.
Yeah, well, I mean, the record is still like 31, right? Maybe that's the Grand Prix I'm thinking of.
I think, on a single card, it's different.
Yeah.
At Grand Prix, there's a bunch of 32s, right? Preordained was a 32, Manlink was a 32, Jace the Mind Sculptor was a 32, Lightning Bolt was a 32. At Pro Tours, I think for both Creature and Enchantment, it was the one that you won. I think Courser of Crufix and Sylvan Caryatid were both.
No, they weren't 32s.
No, they were both. Oh, you're right. Yeah, so Scrappy.
No, because Boros was in the top 8.
Yeah. I think there was 28 in yours for both of those cards. Yeah, so I guess Scrap Heap Scrounger beats that at 31.
Yeah, I think Scrap Heap Scrounger is the record at 31.
Yeah, so I think you're right.
But, man, it's not even just the Once Upon a Time, of course. I mean, Once Upon a Time, I think, just has slightly higher numbers because of the amount of, there were some people who played the green cards without the blue cards. But
good people. Good human beings played some of the green cards without the blue cards. They were swinging with their adventures.
So what would you think? What would you think if the top 3 decks of a format? If I told you, okay, so here's the breakdown for the format. There's 3 decks, like the 3 most played decks. One of them is 37% of the field. One of them is 19% of the field, and one of them is 7.1% of the field. It's kind of a distant third, right?
Yeah, it's a very distant third.
But what do you think of that? What do you make of the top 2 decks representing 56% of the field and third place being only 7? Would you be concerned about the it being,
the viability of the format?
Yeah.
Well, the first question I guess this is a slanted answer because I kind of know the context that we're talking about. This is like, where is the line drawn between decks 1 and 2? Are decks 1 and 2 Simic Food and Sultai Food?
Yeah, and what if deck 3 is Bamp Food?
So the problem with that is those are kind of all the same deck.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like, it's funny, like Pro Tour Rebels was like 43% white Rebels, right? And then there were some oddballs like Ben Rubin who still played Rebels, just also had Blaster in his deck. They didn't count that as a Rebel deck, I guess. But, I mean, Simic Food and Bant Food in particular are like really the same deck. I mean, Sultai Food has some features to it, right?
No, not really. I don't know. They're the same deck.
I mean,
they're so close.
It's like an Aether Gust and
Noxious Grasp.
And a Noxious Grasp they're not too far off from each other.
Right, and then the only other black cards. Right, and then there's just you have 3 discretionary slots. If you play black, you can make them 2 Vraskas and a Massacre Girl or something.
You can't. I bet people go crazy up there. Sometimes they have like a Garuk or
Liliana or Ugin.
Yeah, or like the Casualties of War. The thing is, it depends on how bad you want to get blown out by Veil. That's really the question. Massacre Girl doesn't get blown out by Veil. I think that's where she gets she gets some points.
And Casualties of War is the key to beating those the Witch's Oven decks. If you play Casualties of War in your deck, it's just so good against Witch's Oven. That's one of the things I lament not... See, I just ended up playing blue-green, which was, I think, a good choice. But, like, one of the things I missed out on is that Casualties of War is the best way to... If you're playing Sultai, that is the best answer to those cat oven decks.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic.
Like, you get to a spot where you destroy the oven and the Trail of Crumbs and, like, a Nissa or a Vraska.
Yeah.
And a Massacre Girl.
Yeah.
And a land.
Oh, yeah.
All at the same time.
I'm in. Sounds great. The only problem with it is, like, you know, sometimes you get blown out by Veil.
Yep.
That happens.
It does.
Veil is...
that's part of the reason why you got to play Casualties main deck.
Some maniacs play Veil main deck. And different maniacs play Aether Gust main deck, and still different maniacs play Disdainful Stroke main deck. So the Casualties doesn't... I mean, I guess none of the Sultai Sacrifice people do any of those things, though, actually.
No, not really.
Those guys are all in on their engines. I would argue that the Sultai Sacrifice deck is a meaningfully different deck than Sultai Food, despite having many cards in common, right? So both of those decks have... Wicked Wolf, Oko, Massacre Girl, Once Upon a Time, Noxious Grasp, Gilded
Vraska, yeah.
And yet they're very different decks.
Not really. I don't think they're that different. It's literally the same deck, but you're just adding Witch's Oven and the cat. There's like and Trail of Crumbs. That's it.
Well, yeah, but I think that especially the outlier draws that you try to get to with most of the food decks are trying to get a certain place, and like the really strong draws are around landing, resolving often very quickly Nissa Who Shakes the World, and then winning with, a bunch of, land-based power and or, just casting a giant Hydroid Krasis. That's a very, very different end game than Trail of Crumbs, Food Tokens, Witch's Oven Engine, which is very, very, it's just a super different way to win. Theirs is super grindy, and the food deck's really, one of them's like punching you in the jaw, and the other one's kind of needling you with bits of fingernail or something.
So here's a question for you: what was the among those big three food decks we discussed, the Sultai Food, the Simic Food, and the Bant Food? Which one of them had the highest win rate against other food decks?
That is a great question. I'm going to guess that it was Simic Food.
It was Simic Food, 50.8, which isn't a huge edge, but we're talking about an enormous sample. And that's just
an enormous sample size. Yeah,
and for what it's worth, we're just talking about those three, because if you're willing to go down to the super small sample size, smaller decks, 4-color food, it didn't have very many reps. We're talking about just like 2 people or whatever.
Yeah.
But it did have technically the highest win rate at 56.3, but that's just because the record was 9-7. So it's just so small of a sample size that I don't think it's the same thing. But out of those 3 big decks, Simic Food was the winner in the mirror at 50.8, whereas Sultai Food was 49.8 and Bant Food was 48.5. So, what were, out of those big 3, which one had the best record against non-food decks?
I would guess Bant Food.
No, it's also Simic Food by a lot. Simic Food outperformed Sultai Food and Bant Food in every way.
Okay.
Yeah, Simic Food.
And it also won the tournament, came in 2nd and 3rd.
Yeah. Simic Food, despite a sample size that's bigger than any the sample size we have on these 3 food decks, statistically significant.
I mean, it's the biggest in the history of a single Pro Tour, right?
So now here's the thing: Bant Food was actually the least, despite being the least successful against food decks, it was also the least successful against non-food decks. However, it won 51.1% of the time against non-food decks. All 3 of the food decks were winning records against non-food decks. The Simic food one, though, blew it out of the water, where Sultai was only 53.3. The Simic food was almost 60.
Wow.
That said, you can go even further. So the Sultai Sacrifice deck, so Simic food was the best deck among the like stock archetypes. If you were going to go further and look at the, if you go down to the Sultai Sacrifice deck, which is the same thing, it's a Sultai food deck but with a cat oven deck. And I know you mentioned a distinction. I think your argument that there's a distinction is even more apt when you look at the numbers.
Yep.
You see, this Sultai Sacrifice deck, first of all, it won almost 60% of the games that it played against food decks. And that's out of 69. It went 41-28, which is a fantastic record against food. Nobody else with that big of a sample size had that kind of a win rate. In fact, only Simic food even broke 50%. So the fact that this one was 60%, that's crazy. Now, the question is, how good is Sultai Sacrifice versus non-food decks? It went 34-7.
Wow.
So 83% win rate against non-food decks, a clear break. The fact that this deck has a sample size of 110 matches, and it's over 110 constructed matches, its win rate was over 68% against the field, 60% against the busted deck, 83% against everything else. That is a clean break.
Wow. That's like pushing greatest deck ever.
That's Clawblade did not win that much.
No, it's pushing the greatest deck ever.
And this is the equivalent of there's the Clawblade already. Everybody else is playing Clawblade, and Clawblade's unbeatable. Right?
This is
unbeatable.
This is blue-red Splinter Twin.
This is 83% against everybody else too. Splinter Twin never won close to that against the non-deck it was targeting. I don't know that there's a precedent for this. The fact that the format was so completely busted, the 70% of the field played the busted strategy, and almost nobody could keep up with them despite everyone knowing what they were doing.
So, was anything remotely good against Sultai Sacrifice?
Was anything good against Sultai Sacrifice? I'm not sure, because I don't know where those 7 wins came from.
I don't even know what cards are good against this deck. Right?
Well, it's the same thing as a Sultai food deck. It's just better against everything.
Yeah, so the thing is,
also, incidentally, if anybody's playing a tournament this weekend, I would play the Sultai food deck.
Sultai Sacrifice or Sultai food?
Sultai Sacrifice. The Sultai Sacrifice deck. It is so dominant.
I am playing a tournament this week. My backup deck is just to play Simic food, but
Simic food?
Yeah.
But I would play Dude, are you going to play Sultai Sacrifice?
I think back.
Oh no!
I think back to something one of my best friends once told me, who said, "If you never net deck, you're no brain. Yet if you never brew, you're no heart."
I hope this is a net deck weekend.
I've just been playing like the generic food decks, but not the generic food, like, Bant food.
Bant food is the worst food.
Yeah, but I've been winning. I mean, it was whatever, just local tournaments. You can't compare those to the Mythic Championship VI. But I've just been doing fine. We didn't know about the Sultai Sacrifice deck, in my boony neck of the woods, New York City, before this tournament. Although Abe Corrigan, I guess, is a Brooklyn native, and he won the Grand Prix on Sunday with it. I wasn't planning on playing it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think I'm going to go my own way. But
you're not going to play some non-Oko deck, are you?
My deck is Bant colors, and it doesn't have Oko in it.
Oh my God! Why are you doing this, dude?
Because love of the game, Patrick.
Okay, dude. Okay.
If you want to tally up the number of times that one of us was contrarian in the face of people having a settled idea about how good things were in the room, we would both be, I think, on the right side of the line.
So there are a couple decks that really overperformed, though, that are kind of worth pointing out. I mean, this Sultai Sacrifice deck was like the sickest ever. However, I'd be interested to know what the record was of Sultai Sacrifice versus Rakdos Sacrifice. Not Rakdos Sacrifice, sorry, Rakdos Knights. The Rakdos Knights deck, now it only has 50 matches under its belt, much lower sample size, but that 50 is not nothing. And it was 56. It was over 56. It was basically 56% against food and 56% against non-food.
That's good.
That's real good. And if it turns out, I mean, who knows where those 7 losses came from for Sultai Sacrifice? If Rakdos Knights actually has any kind of a matchup there, that's kind of an interesting thing to keep in mind.
So,
and then, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing I was thinking is, when you look at a deck like the Sultai Sacrifice deck, especially early part of this season on like MTG Arena, I was playing like a lot of mono red. I hadn't collected enough, rare and mythic wildcards yet, so I was playing kind of a simpler deck to start. Like just playing against certain cards like Gilded Goose, which has 2 toughness. I know that's going to sound silly. It has 2 toughness and makes a life gain engine along with it on turn 1, and then you're playing cards like the cat, the Cauldron Familiar, who's kind of gaining life and can just trade with a 1 toughness creature, and you've got Witch's Oven, and you've got Oko himself. Oko is the terror for beatdown decks, obviously, right? Like I don't even know, like if you're not playing, the core cards of the food engine decks, typically you're playing kind of faster aggro decks. You're playing like red 1-drops, burn spells. They're terrible against these decks. Like utterly dismal. So like how bad is Shock against Murderous Rider? Doesn't kill it. Murderous Rider has lifelink. Like every in other formats when you have these people who are like deploying these kind of weirdo strategies, sometimes you keep them honest by attacking with a Goblin Guide. There's no such Goblin Guide in this format. Everything is too slow in red. And then, is there a viable white weenie deck? I guess no. Selesnya Adventure is the viable white weenie deck.
It's not viable though. I mean, I guess it is. It's more viable than Golgari. Golgari Adventure struggled against food and struggled against non-food. But that's actually kind of a running theme. Like, how we mentioned Sultai Food, Simic Food, and Bamp Food were the top 3 decks in terms of popularity. Well, if you look at the next 3 decks, Golgari Adventure, Jeskai Fires, and Temur Reclamation, they all lose to food and non-food.
Oh my god. Jeskai, I was so depressed looking down at the standings. Magicians who I've worked with for years, respected, collaborated with, guys like Zvi Moshowitz, Sam Black, coming in it with Jeskai Fires, and like no wins next to their names.
The Jeskai Fire deck seems horrendous. I played against it one time in the tournament, and they struggled with the card Aether Gust.
I mean, these are some of the best constructed minds we have, right? And putting up no wins. Like that is a function of that archetype just not being able to stand up to these weapons, I think. So you mentioned Selesnya Adventure, which I don't think it really plays out like a white aggro deck. It's definitely a lot more of a green deck than a white deck. But it's like a white weenie deck. I don't know. The fact that you're even just Glimpse of Naturing with your guy. The thing is that Selesnya Adventure and Golgari Adventure, neither one of them were very good. I mean, Selesnya Adventure at least had an almost 51% win rate. It was 52% against Simic Food, but it struggled against non-food. The real Adventure winner, however, I mean, it's only 30 matches in, but Gruul Adventure went 15-8 against food, so 65%. And it also went 5-2 against non-food for 71.4%. So this is Javier Dominguez played this to 8 wins, right? Yeah, there were a couple people who played it, but yeah, I think he may have been the best performer. Which is not surprising. That guy, he has a hard time losing these days. So just coming off of a Mythic Championship V win with a different Gruul deck. So this deck has Edgewall Innkeeper as a 1-drop. Rather, the previous deck had Pelt Collector, right? So this one has Edgewall Innkeeper, and there's not even a strong adventure theme, right? Rimrock Knight, Bonecrusher Giant, Lovestruck Beast. Like, those are all just cards people play, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not an all-in deck. This is more of an Embercleave deck.
Yeah. And I think that, like, Embercleave is... I think that when we get done banning the cards that are about to get banned, Embercleave is going to become the new bad guy. What do you think about that?
Unlikely.
You think unlikely?
Yeah.
You think there's other stuff that's going to be way more in power line before Embercleave gets there in Standard?
We'll see. First of all, it depends on how many cards they ban, because to start with, there is no one card that you could ban that would be enough.
So here's the question. What is enough? What does that mean?
Great question.
So, is it to... Like, last time, what did they ban? They banned Field of the Dead.
Yep.
Did they ban anything else? Just Field of the Dead,
nope,
right? Just
Field of the Dead.
So what they did was they took a format that was utterly lopsided in favor of the Golos deck. And
sort of. It was a 2-deck format.
Yeah, it was the Simic Food deck and the Golos deck. Is that fair?
Yep.
And they just made it so everyone that used to be Simic Food or Golos just went to Simic Food or its cousins. But they did eliminate the Golos deck from competitive play without banning Golos or Circuitous Shroud or any of its other signature cards. They just took out one card and murdered the deck. Right?
Yep.
So I think...
But it's a deck full of cards. The entire deck was built around it. This deck, all the cards are so unreal good.
So the thing is, I think you start by banning Oko.
No question. I mean, any plan, like the amount of cards that I think you have to ban if you don't ban Oko. Like I think we could at least start the conversation with, like, say you ban Once Upon a Time and Veil of Summer and Nissa Who Shakes the World, or Once Upon a Time and Veil of Summer and Hydroid Crassus. At least you could, like, start the conversation if you banned at least 3 of those cards.
So, Patrick, I'm sorry, just to clarify, that's in a universe where we're not banning Oko?
Right, that's okay. What I think I think that's what you have to come to the table with to not be laughed out of the room. I don't know that that's enough, but I think that's the starting point of enough if you don't ban Oko, is that you have to ban Once Upon a Time, Veil of Summer, and either Nissa or Hydroid Crassus.
What about the Goose? What about Little Gilding?
I really don't think you should ban the Goose. So it's powerful. It would be more impactful to ban the Goose, but I think that the remedy would be worse than the ailment.
Yeah, so that's really what I was asking. Like, what is enough, and what are we trying to accomplish here?
Right. It's the same. So, like, Wicked Wolf is another one. I don't think they should ban Wicked Wolf. I think you're making it worse if you ban Wicked Wolf.
Yeah, I don't want to ban any inoffensive cards. That's actually, like, Wicked Wolf isn't bother anybody. It's just, like, a good card.
Right, and that's my point, is the goal is not just to find the best cards and ban them. That's not the point. The play experience, you see, one of their goals is to have a little bit of diversity. Like right now, the format is 88% green. That's a little high. Obviously, the Oko deck, do you realize that it's not just that Once Upon a Time is the most played card ever? We have a new 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th place.
That's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice for Nissa Who Shakes the World. You know, Nissa's been around for not even a year, right? Nissa came out over the summer only. But, you know, she's got a spot. I think you, in Standard, you start by banning Oko. I don't know if you ban anybody else.
I think you're crazy.
First of all, I might be crazy. You're not the first person to accuse me of that. I'm just saying I don't know if you ban anybody else.
Like, first of all, how much do the sacrifice decks rely on Oko compared to anything else?
They don't. It's just a good card in that deck.
Right. Second of all,
I actually think the sacrifice deck is probably just fine. Like, its core engine doesn't require Oko to be in play, right? They have many other sources of food.
Right. They're only doing it because Oko's that messed up of a card.
Yeah, so
Like going to the trouble of playing the extra color.
They would still be green, right? Like you want Trail of Crumbs, you want
Definitely, yeah, they would still be
possibly
green.
want Gilded Goose.
Definitely. So,
You're saying they just don't want? You're thinking they're just not going to be blue anymore. They just be like a black
Right.
green deck. I see.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Or a black, green, red deck.
Oh, okay. That's a deck.
Like
That was a high
the
finishing deck, actually, but like reasonable.
Yeah.
Finishing deck.
you see, part of the problem here is that when the first place, second place, and third place decks are all the same deck, and the best deck in the tournament is the seventh most played deck, and it's the same deck. You look at the other decks and you're like, okay, well, Golgari Adventure is a green deck, Temur Reclamation is a green deck, right? Gruul Aggro is a green deck, Schlesny Adventure is a green deck, Jund Sacrifice is a green deck, Gruul Aggro is a green deck, Sultai Elementals is a green deck, Simic Flash is a green deck, Temur Planeswalkers is a green deck. The only non-green decks are Jeskai Fires, which did horribad,
Yeah.
Azorius Control, which was even worse.
Azorius Control is better than Jeskai Fire. It was like it had some
No.
like medium wins, right?
No. Like, Jeskai Fire's win rate was 47%. Azorius Control's win rate was 45%. There's Rakdos, which had a 49% win rate. Esper, the Esper Doom Foretold deck, 41% win rate. Rakdos Knights has the dubious distinction of being the only deck with a winning record despite the lack of forest.
That's not dubious. That's the congratulations are in order for the Rakdos Knights, fellas.
Yeah. All right. Well, the point is that, man, green is really, really strong. And just like you pointed out that Once Upon a Time was the most played card, there are people playing Once Upon a Time without Oko. And I think Oko is the strongest card, and the people not playing Oko are taking advantage of not making their mana worse and have slightly different engines that are really preying on the amount of Oko decks out there. But they still weren't as good as the Oko decks. But if you ban Oko, it's not like the deck of Gilded Goose, Hydroid Crassus, Wicked Wolf, Nissa Who Shakes the World, Aether Gust, Growth Spiral, even just the blue-green deck is still incredible. And that's to say nothing of, I think that the Sacrifice deck is just crazy. And it doesn't help the fact that all the other decks are green also. Golgari Adventure and Celestine Adventure, Gruul Adventure.
What do you think about the Sacrifice? Obviously, this is kind of let's call it a lame goose format, right? So it's going to be over in less than 7 days. This format is not going to exist anymore. I was thinking, like, is there some argument that the Sultai Sacrifice variation is kind of like a very, very bright flash in the pan, only because it is so much more easily angled than the core food decks? Like, the core food decks, there's no argument that on an individual basis their cards are wildly more powerful than the cards in the Sultai Sacrifice deck, right? Like, Cauldron Familiar is cute, Trail of Crumbs is pretty good, Witch's Oven is cute, but if you don't have them together, they're way less impressive than Nissa and Hydroid Krasis, right? They're less impressive often than Brazen Borrower and, whatever.
Yeah, but like, what
you got going on?
What is it that you're proposing people are playing to beat them?
So,
I mean, Casualties of War is obviously the first thing you want, right? But like, it's not like they lost to anybody.
So, two things I was thinking. One of them is, obviously, you need people to get on board to do this, and they're unlikely to do this given the window. But like, cards like Planar Cleansing are very effective against decks that are just putting a bunch of material, like, non-differentiated types of material on the battlefield. That's one. There are people who play those.
Yeah, but what playable deck could use that?
But just as an example, there are a lot of decks, including top 8 competitor Andrew Cuneo, played Apostle of Purifying Light in his sideboard. Apostle of Purifying Light seems outstanding to me against this deck. They have no way to fight it, right? So Massacre Girl can kill it, which is, that's pretty good.
That's a pretty good way to fight it.
Yeah, but like it does a lot of damage to the core engine before you get there. Like they can't even fight it in combat. So that's something that I think that is it's.
But can't they Oko it?
They can elk it, sure, but that's no different of an argument than the Simic food deck being able to elk something. I'm just saying that the Apostle Purifying Light would never put the Simic food deck in that position. That you see what I'm saying? Like that there's sure they have potential answers, but you can't even angle the Simic food deck. The Sultai Sacrifice deck can at least be put into a corner where they're
sort of. The Sultai Sacrifice deck did angle the food decks. It won 60% of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think unprepared, the Sultai Sacrifice deck clearly looks like it has the edge against the core food decks. I think that it's one of those things where, when you were talking about the Cawblade deck earlier, the Cawblade deck, if you give it a minute to think about things and regroup, and all of a sudden they've got dismembers, or they have a different land mix or something, they can often I'd say surprise you, but it's not surprising. It's like the best deck ever.
I do think Andrew Cuneo's take on green-white Innkeeper was a green-white adventure is definitely there's a lot to like here. Like the March of the Multitudes and Unbreakable Formation and Conclave Tribunal. It really is borrowing, particularly the Venerated Luxodon. You were exactly right. It really was borrowing from White Aggro's playbook.
So I think that March of the Multitudes is a good example of a card that is not only really powerful, but is a card that can potentially angle the Sultai Sacrifice deck. Like, Sultai Sacrifice deck is even worse than the food decks against March of the Multitudes. Its guys, for the most part, are small, and just an overwhelming number of 1/1 lifelinkers attacking them. They're just going to take it. Now, can they come back with a Massacre Girl? Maybe. Yeah, maybe it gets countered. But basically, those 1/1 creatures are very
countered.
Yeah, Massacre Girl can be countered. Oh, I'm sorry. Not in Andrew's deck, of course. Sorry.
Right.
I'm just saying as a card. A moment ago I was saying maybe the food decks can reconfigure. There's no reason why a Bant food deck might not consider playing a card like March of the Multitudes. They can make an enormous amount of mana, for example.
Oh, yeah.
So, Nissa into that is similarly exciting to Nissa into Hydroid Krasis, and you just apply it in a situation where the opponent's Noxious Grasp doesn't destroy you, right? Instead, it's highly ineffective.
Yeah, no, it's probably a less played card than it should be, assuming that anything besides cards for food decks should be played.
Yeah, but I think just in this case, a food deck, if they really wanted to, could probably make it work. It's not hard. So
it's also a card to keep in mind moving forward, because I think that whatever they do, there's going to be some version of this cat oven deck around, and I think your point still stands regarding March of the Multitudes.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of banning Once Upon a Time in addition to Oko?
I think Once Upon a Time is definitely headed for the banned list, but not in Standard.
You don't think it's going to get banned in Standard?
I don't. I do not think so. I think that it will. I think that within the next 365 days, it will be banned in Pioneer. I do not think it will be banned in Standard during its current lifetime. That is my current prediction. I'm often wrong around the ban times. I thought it was going to get banned this week, and they only banned Veil.
Yeah, but speaking of which, what do you think of banning Veil
in Standard?
In Standard. Yeah.
I mean, sign me
first,
up.
What do you think? First of all, what do you think of banning Veil in Pioneer?
I thought that was a really interesting decision that they make. I actually would not have. That was not my instinct on this week's ban. Not that they have to ban something every week, but it wasn't my instinct that they should do that. In hindsight, and looking at the arguments that a lot of highly respected players have been saying on social media about it, it makes a ton of sense to me. You were already saying how bad counterspells are in Pioneer. That is really a card, because of how easy it is to make a single green mana. It narrows the available decks a lot.
Right, and I think it was by far the biggest contributor to why counterspells were so bad in Pioneer. They're still not that good because the rates aren't that good.
Yeah, because there aren't
Thoughtseize.
any good counterspells to play.
But I think it's a good step. I think it's a good step in the right direction, and it's an interesting portent of what may come in Standard. Once you're willing to ban Autumn's Veil or Summer of Veil of Summer in Pioneer, it definitely speaks to, it does ask the question, because I do think that would be a meaningful card to ban in Standard. I think if you were to ban Veil of Summer in addition to Oko, maybe at least that's something, because I think you've got to ban something from green that just gives power across the board. And I think that banning Gilded Goose makes the format less fun, and it's just a worse world. I think banning Wicked Wolf is not very effective. I think that banning Nissa, who shakes the world, even though she's an extremely powerful card, one, it doesn't make any sense when you're banning Oko already. Two, the value of a replacement is just not that high.
Oh, I think banning Nissa would be dismal. I
think so too.
Like the the Oko apologists that were talking about banning Nissa at previous large events it's just Looney Tunes to me. Like, Nissa is an utterly balanced, fair, very good Magic card that happens to be in the same color as a bunch of crazy Magic cards. Of course, it's just in the wrong neighborhood.
And while I think Hydroid Crassus is not like a good guy, I do think that Hydroid Crassus being blue makes it less attractive of an option if you're already banning Oko. Because I think you got to hit the non-blue people. If you take Oko, you're already hitting the blue people so hard. You got to hit the non, and that makes the only two real options Once Upon a Time and Veil of Summer. I mean, I guess like Lovestruck Beast is like this. It's an interesting conversation, but I think it's got to be one.
Lovestruck Beast is literally the good guys.
I don't think you should. Well, it's also the bad guys.
I mean, the fact that there's a no downside card advantage negator and he's the good guys that's insane. By the way, the rate on that card is unreal.
It's definitely Veil of Summer and Once Upon a Time are the options for an additional card. Also, I don't think it's out of the question to ban all three.
I think that they will not ban all three this time. I think Oko is if I had to pick, I think they would only ban Oko. My second thought is they're going to ban Oko and Veil. But
you don't think they're going to ban Once Upon a Time, man?
I don't think they're ever going to ban Once Upon a Time. So there is a loud voice in R&D right now, and I think that voice has been too loud in recent years. But there is a loud voice in R&D that I think started with Mike Turian, who isn't even designing cards anymore, right? Which is just like, we want to create a context where people can play the game. Once Upon a Time and the London Mulligan, people are playing the game. They're developing in the early turns. Their mulligans are less painful. I think
you should ban the London Mulligan too.
I think banning the London Mulligan that's very on the table. Zvi said something super astute to me recently, which was that if somebody keeps a 7-card hand in Standard and they are a competent player, right? They are not like they don't know the actual technology that's in the 75 cards in front of them. Your working assumption has to be that they have their core play pattern in their opening hand. Like, that's the only, or like it's very close, right? Like, let's say you have like an Oko and a Goose, but maybe not a Forest, but you can quickly get the Forest because you have Once Upon a Time, right? Like, that's just going to happen. So that's the first time in Standard that we can plausibly just say people who keep 7-card hands, they're just starting with the nuts.
Well, I don't know. When I played Academy, the year I won the state championships with Academy, I was keeping 7-card hands, and they were always the nuts.
Interesting.
That's because every hand is the nuts.
Interesting. All of your hands included, like, first turn Wheel of Fortune, opponent discards their hand, though, right? Yeah. But that happened every game on the first turn, right?
Basically. It was always one thing or another, man. Dude, Lotus Petal was legal. Tolarian Academy, it was just like...
I would just like to point out that at that same state championships, not the same one, it was one state over, your fellow Hall of Famer Bob Maher Jr., who was also playing Academy, lost to a mono red land destruction deck. So, in the finals of his state championship.
Dude, I faced a mono red in the top 8.
The original Panzerata Red defeated one of the greatest players of all time with arguably the most broken deck of all time. But you won. But I'm just saying,
dude, I played against a mono red deck where so on turn 1 I do a bunch of dope stuff and then they melt down for 0, and then on my turn I do a bunch of dope stuff and then they melt down for 1, and so then I kill them on the third turn.
Yeah.
Osip
Levodovich, he was telling me this story about when he won a Grand Prix in Florida. I can't remember, maybe Grand Prix Orlando. It was like basically the debut of Aether Vial. So people knew that there was affinity decks, right? But affinity decks with Aether Vial were different than affinity decks with,
Bruise Star.
Yeah, whatever kind of affinity that they had before Aether Vial, right? So he's in the finals, and I think he mulls to 5, right? And his opponent's playing a mono red deck, and he is just going nutso in his chair. And Osip's like, "Oh man, I'm mulled to 5. I am so screwed," right? And it's like he just plays out his stuff. Turn 4, the opponent plays his Shatterstorm. That was whatever the illegal Shatterstorm was, but that one doesn't destroy artifact lands. It only destroys like non-land artifacts. And Osip's like, "That was it." And he just kills him like the next turn. That's like your story. It's like your story.
Sums it up. So, dude, you think Veil of Summer, or you just don't care about Veil of Summer? You're not like in favor of it being banned. You just don't care.
I don't think Veil of Summer changes things that much once you're already on banning Oko. I think Veil of Summer is probably not something that we want to have legal in formats. Like the rate on the card is just... I think that if you're in a color, you never want to have a single card in any color in a broad enough format where you're just like, you should always play this card, right? And Veil of Summer is outrageous. This card is... Like, think about how good Dispel is in Modern, right? Dispel is a widely played card in Modern. This card is like Dispel, draw a card, but also you can Dispel, non-spell activations. Or you could just cantrip it if you feel like it. Like, the rate on the card is just unbelievable.
Yep.
You're trading like 0 for 6 most of the time. And
I don't know about all that.
You're trading most 0 for 3 all the time, right? It's crazy how much return this card gets you in a variety of situations. Stuff that's on the battlefield, stuff that's on the stack, stuff that's trying to have interactions between planeswalkers or other key permanents. I think like the card does not promote. It doesn't promote. Forget about healthy play banners. It doesn't promote deck building. And from that perspective, I hate anything that doesn't promote deck building. Like, think about cards that are staple in a lot of formats that are very good and have been good for 20 years, like Duress. Duress is not played in every deck that can tap for black, right? It's played in some decks that can tap for black, and there are different variations of Duress that you might play. But you remember when Duress was first printed, we're like, oh, wow, this is the greatest thing. We played in beatdown decks, we played in control decks, we played in, blue deck sideboards. It's played sometimes. And very few people play 4 copies. I think Veil of Summer is like super transcending what Duress ever was before there were Thoughtseizes and Inquisitions, etc.
Dude, it's pretty good against Duress too.
Yeah. Like that's a great example. It doesn't just stop permission spells.
No.
It messes up like the other thing is like it like messes up thought erasure. And the thing like first of all, that stinks. Like it's getting thought erasure on a mana basis on 1 for 2. It has its additional Veil of Summerness. And the other thing about thought erasure that makes me like extra, piteous of it, decks that have thought erasure often just need to play thought erasure to fix their draw. And like it's like, all right, I'm getting my thought erasure veiled. That stinks. But it's really super stinks. Like you don't even have the option because I need this card to fix my draw. So it's just really mean spirited. It's not civil. This is not what gentlemen do.
Okay.
I think from those standpoints, I would ban Veil. But I think like in terms of what matters, banning Oko is way more important than banning Veil. And I don't think they're touching Once Upon a Time in Standard. I do think they're touching Once Upon a Time in Pioneer before I play an important Pioneer tournament.
What did you think of Paulo's Simic Food deck? So he played almost all the cards that everybody plays.
Yeah.
But then for his discretionary spot, so first of all, instead of playing 4 Aether Gusts, He played 2 Aether Gusts and 2 Mass Manipulations. And then and then it's 3 discretionary spots. So basically, instead of 3 discretionary spots, he had 5, because he cut the 2 Aether Gusts. So he had 2 Mass Manipulation and 3 Brazen Borrower.
So there's a little more discretion even there. Like, so Paulo played 25 lands versus Stratsky in the finals played 26 lands. Right, so there's like a little bit more wiggling there.
Sure, and I guess Paulo played Castle Vantris instead of another Temple of Mystery or a mobilized district.
So the real question I have, first of all, shout out to Paulo. I could not believe some of the. I mean, in the last part of his semifinal match, Paulo mulliganed to 5, and his first play was a Gilded Goose that got Crawl Harpoonered, and he won the game by a mile. I was just like, wow. Down 4 cards to start. Turn 2, you're down 4 cards with Pro Tour Finals on the line. And kick wham stunner on that one. I think that if this sets the line to where Simic Food decks are playing, which I think that it kind of does because Stratsky also played 2 copies of Mass Manipulation, then you kind of have to acknowledge it. Those Mass Manipulations are very discretionary relative to decks prior to the Mythic Championship. Different variations of this archetype might have had, Disdainful Stroke instead of Aether Gust, might have had 4 Brazen Borrower. If we go back far enough, and far enough is only a month at this point, you're talking about playing Questing Beasts. But Mass Manipulation is really, really important to acknowledge because if you're playing against people who are, in their like top-end discretionary spots, are either playing large creatures like Questing Beast or playing planeswalkers like Vraska or Liliana or Ugin, Mass Manipulation goes over the top of those folks, whether or not you have Anissa. If you have Anissa, it really goes over the top. I think it's not just I think that it's worthy of respect, both in the case of Paulo and Stratsky, but I think that's just where the bar is now. You have to.
So you don't like Sebastian's version with 4 Aether Gusts instead of just 2, and the 4th Brazen Borrower, so just no Mass Manipulations.
I think that if you were going to play these decks against each other like many, 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 many games, that Pozo would be behind most of the time. An appreciable amount of time, maybe not most of the time, right? It's going to be not too far away from the 50 to 60% mark, but at the end of the day, Aether Gust is not a permanent solution. So if you're using it, you're typically using it to prevent the opponent from gaining like an enormous amount of time on you or to maintain time that you already have. But it's not stopping somebody from just beating you with the Mass Manipulation. Like that's actually a big problem, right? If your opponent has an unopposed Nissa who shakes the world and casts a Mass Manipulation, Pozo deck isn't even an answer to that. Right, like the decks from Mythic Championship V that the Pantheon played, who had Disdainful Stroke rather than Aether Gust in that kind of semi-discretionary spot, could at least counter it. After sideboarding, most of these decks can Veil of Summer, which is you're in a kind of a threat answer query there. But in game 1, I mean, you got your life on the line. Which deck are you going to pick? I'm definitely picking Paulo or Stratsky's deck.
I think so too. What do you think of the use of a Negate, a Disdainful Stroke, and 2 Casualties of War as the flex in Del Tour's deck?
In my head, I'm like, I don't even know how much some of these flexes matter. I think the
in my experience, they didn't matter that much because so much of the game was around those 6 power cards.
Like the Casualties War, if it hits, it's the best, right? It's literally the best. You're taking out like a food token, you're taking out a powerful planeswalker, you're taking out their best creature, which might be like a 7/7 flying trample, and it might be a land, or you might take it out another land, right? Like, the card is insane. At the same time, it costs 6, and it has double black. It's not trivial to cast, right? Like, sometimes you just don't have it. So I'm not even sure, like, if you're in that spot and you have like a 6 open, is it how much? That's not. Is it better? How much better is it than Ugin, for example? Ugin, which is a card.
I was really happy with Ugin. I played one Ugin in Simic, and I was happy with it.
Like Ugin does a lot of what Casualties of War does, right? It destroys a powerful permanent, and it can produce card advantage given enough time. And unlike Casualties of War, Ugin can actually win the game. So
it's also so much better against Aether Gust and Autumn's Veil or Summer Veil of Summer.
Yeah, I don't know that I would even play Casualties of War over Ugin given the option. If it's me and I decided to play Sultai Food rather than Sultai Sacrifice, I don't know how you get to this archetype without main deck Massacre Girl. To me, the whole reason to go the color combination.
No, because why are you going to play Massacre Girl? Why would you play main deck? Who do you want it against main deck?
I actually really like Massacre Girl because it's a threat that you can get late game with Once Upon a Time.
No, of course, but like, who do you want it against? Do you want it in the mirror?
It's pretty good there, right?
No,
no,
I don't think so. I think it's great, but that's part of the problem. And what got me off of Sultai is the fact that I don't want Massacre Girl in the mirror, and I don't want to play a main deck configuration that is not literally the exact 60 I want for the mirror. It's 70% of the field plays the same deck. I don't want to play a card that's only good against 30% of the field when every card in my deck is so busted.
So let me ask you a question. If you're playing Simic Food and you've got one Ugin in your main, that's your total Ugins, you don't have a second Ugin somewhere?
Right.
How do you think that lines up against decks that have one or more, 2 copies of Mass Manipulation? Terrible, good, okay?
Oh, it's okay.
Because you can get out of it with Borrowers, right? Is that the theory?
That's one thing you can do. I wasn't smart enough to play Borrower. But, yeah, I think
you kind of have to have Borrower in this room.
Yeah, I think so, too. But I think that I definitely think you should be playing Borrower. But I think Massacre Girl is good against Food when it comes out of a black-green deck. Like when it's coming out of the Sacrifice deck or any of those decks, it's good. I think that if you don't at least try a little, like if you don't have the cat or some amount of Adventure Guys or something else, I don't like it as much. Main deck anyway. I think
you just need a 1 toughness guy to get the ball rolling.
Right.
So there are Paradise Druids in most of these decks. That's
one thing you can do. It's not like that's the plan, is that you want to just find a Paradise Druid, hope it lives, so that you can get Massacre Girl to kill your own Druid.
Yeah, but most of the opponent decks have as many or more Paradise Druids than Wicked Wolves even, right? Like, I don't think that there is a paucity of Paradise Druids. Actually, I wanted to ask you about that. Why do you think that Paradise Druid was such a popular card and has been such a popular card in this archetype since week 1 versus cards like Growth Spiral? Like, I don't know.
I played Growth Spiral.
Crazily underplayed to me.
Yeah, I played Growth Spiral, and it seems slightly better than Paradise Druid to me, but I don't know.
Like, it's almost equally good on turn 2, and it's way better when you rip it late. Like, way better.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely better. I still like Paradise Druid better on turn like 3, 4, maybe. Like, there's not a very big window where I like the Druid better because I like Growth Spiral. I actually like Growth Spiral a lot on turn 2. I think one of the nice things is holding up 2 mana and then being able to take advantage of it in a way that you can't do with Paradise Druid.
Oh, I super agree with you.
I was very sympathetic to the argument if Paradise Druid gets eaten by Wicked Wolf.
Not
always, but sometimes.
Maybe this is crazy, but I've been siding my Paradise Druids out in the mirror consistently when I've been playing. I had a match last week where I just did nothing on turn 2 and turn 3. I played my Goose on turn 3. I literally didn't play it before then because I just wanted to leave my my blue and 1 cards up open in the mirror match, and I snagged a Nissa on the 3rd turn, which is great, and then I landed my Nissa. But you can't do that with Paradise Druid, right? You can do that with Growth Spiral, though.
Yeah.
I think Growth Spiral is underplayed and Paradise Druid is way overplayed.
Either way, I don't think any of them matter that much compared to the to the core engine.
Yeah, I mean the cards are so similar, right? Like,
Yeah.
in terms of they're just basically on the same spot on the curve, and they're getting you to call it third turn Wicked Wolf, call it, third or fourth turn Nissa Who Shakes the World. Sideboarded games, they could be getting you to to Questing Beast, or maybe your Voracious Hydra a little bit earlier.
Well, so what do you think, man? Moving forward, let's imagine that. First of all, what if? Yeah, do you think it matters too much? Like, let's say that if Oko and then like one out of Veil of Summer or Once Upon a Time gets banned, what do you like next week?
I think one of the blue-white based control decks is going to rise. And so
interesting.
It's puzzling to me how the Azorius and the Esper parts of the world don't do better in this context. And part of my answer is just some of the best players in the world, the Paulos of the world, are just sleeving up the Oko deck. So Reed's playing Sultai Food. You're playing Simic Food. You're just taking all the brain power and putting it into the Oko side of the room. Because I don't think that the cards line up badly for the Azorius adjacent decks. Like, it seems to me that Realm Cloak Giant and Time Wipe is an insane combination. It seems to me that Brazen Borrower and Time Wipe is an insane combination. Or Gadwick and Time Wipe. Or Planar Cleansing and your opponent's battle, side of the battlefield. Like, all these things seem to make a ton of sense to me. And playing a deck that doesn't really interact with Oko is extraordinarily attractive, right? Like, Oko is
but the deck's just not powerful enough.
Like,
nobody built a blue-white deck that beat the Oko decks. They all thought they did, but they got crushed 43% against Oko.
No, I hear you. It just doesn't make sense to me why that should be the case.
Because the Oko cards are so much more powerful.
I think Oko is...
Yes, they line up in a way that, like the blue-white deck does have the advantages on, like at a strategic level. The blue-white deck, it's all the right things. It's just that its cards, it just doesn't have as many broken cards.
So it seems to me like one of the reasons I think that the Oko decks are so good is because of cards like Once Upon a Time and Veil of Summer. Right? So
definitely.
If you're on Once Upon a Time and the blue-white deck isn't on Once Upon a Time, like think about it like that. Like, the Oko deck keeping 7 and having access to Once Upon a Time is very likely to play its first 4 turns in a way that it wants to play. Whereas the blue-white deck actually has to, like, all right, I need to play 5 lands. I need to have, like, the relevant sweeper. I need it to resolve. Like, there are a lot of questions along the way. If it resolves, I'm probably ahead, but they might still windmill slam me. They're like, all right, I'm ahead. And they're like, okay, while you're tapped out, play Nissa Who Shakes the World and slam your Planeswalker. Now you're way behind again. So I think, like, the Oko decks, their draws are just so much better on average in the early game. Like, the first 2 or 3 turns of the game. And I think that's a big part of it. But, like, doesn't it seem to be the case that, like, Doom Foretold and Planar Cleansing, it just seems like those cards line up really, really well against these green decks?
I don't think so. Doom Foretold, I played against Doom Foretold also and smashed it. It did not seem competitive. It's like, they play Doom Foretold. Why would that beat me? I could just make food every turn.
I mean, I think that, like, Doom Foretold isn't the end in and of itself. Doom Foretold is, like, the last piece in their combination. Like, they have to...
How are they beating me? Are they beating me with the 2-cost artifacts that do nothing but draw a card? I mean, those are obviously not good here.
Well,
are they beating me with permission?
No.
My deck has Veil of Summer and 4 Hydroid Crafts and 4 Once Upon a Time to find the Krauses. In my experience, they just could not beat Hydroid Krauses at all. And then it's not like Nissa Who Shakes the World is good for them.
No, it's great against them.
Definitely.
I think that their context...
And I didn't even play. I drew Aether Gust against them, and it didn't matter. like most people have Noxious Grasp, which you can at least use to kill Teferi.
So I'm thinking like they need to set you up. They need to get you with a Planar Cleansing or a Kaya's Wrath or a Time Wipe, and then they need to Doom Foretold you.
They're still going to lose to Hydra Crests.
Yeah, I mean, I can potentially buy it. I feel like I buy it. I mean, if you just look at the numbers, the highest performing Azorius control deck had 5 wins, and that means that everybody who was not the highest performing Azorius control deck did worse than 5 wins, right? Versus, the highest performing Simic Food deck had 12 wins. So
I will tell you that when they ban Oko, as long as they ban one or the other out of Veil of Summer or Once Upon a Time, it'll help a lot, because I think that Veil of Summer is just so brutal for any of these blue decks, right?
It's not just the blue decks, right?
No, it's not, but I'm just trying to point out that they both Once Upon a Time and Veil of Summer punish the blue decks, because Once Upon a Time gives you so many more looks for a Crassus, and the Crassus destroys them because it can't be countered, the card draw part. The fact that Veil of Summer stops counterspells and Hydra Crassus goes through counterspells just makes counterspells inherently poorly positioned in this format. And that's incidental, because it's not like the Crassus is bad against anybody else. And it's not like the Veil of Summer doesn't just stop all the black cards, too.
So one of the reasons that I like keeping Once Upon a Time in the format is I do think that it's, let's call it healthy with if air quotes, to have the Golgari or the Selesnya or the Gruul folks somewhat able to set their engine up, right? And that Once Upon a Time helps them hit the Innkeeper on turn 1 so that they can have an interesting non-Simic Food-related game plan in green. And I think...
I don't know. It's not like Once Upon a Time helps them that much more than the Simic people, right?
No.
It just helps every green deck.
Yeah, it just helps them play. And I think that that's okay. Because I think that the Azorius adjacent decks are going to get a lot better. A lot better when Oko gets banned. And certainly if Oko and Veil both get banned, I think those decks probably jump up to most desirable strategy in the format until somebody knocks them down. Because once you're in the situation where people are not getting these outlier draws on turn 2 anymore, and they actually have to plan for 5 turns, the blue-white decks are so much more powerful than they are. And that if you're in a position where they're looping giants and time wipes and then casting Gadwick and whatever, they're doing the exact same kind of thing that the Simic type decks are doing, but they're doing it while destroying tons of the Simic decks permanents at the same time. So
interesting. All right.
You don't buy that?
No, I think I'm going to have to see. I think it's some interesting theory behind it.
So
I think either way, we're going to see a bloodbath on Monday, and it'll be interesting to see the Goose Song this weekend of Oko decks.
All right, so let's say that I'm not a complete lunatic, but I'm going to play a food deck instead of a sacrifice deck. How many lands should I play? 25, 26, 24?
I like 25.
25? Okay. And then you think 2 mass manipulations?
Or... I don't know. I'm not sure yet. I would default by playing the same list as Paulo and go from there. His list looked the best to me. Off the top of my head, I kind of do like the look of playing a 3rd Aether Gust, but I would default to just playing the same thing as Paulo unless new information was presented.
I like your Ugin. That's the thing. You did mention that to me beforehand, and it seems really, really good to me. It's better against Veil of Summer than Mass Manipulation, right? And I have to assume all of my opponents are going to play for Veil of Summer.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about Mass Manipulation, though, it does have some value against. Although I don't know, I guess they're just going to Veil of Autumn you anyway, or Veil of Summer you anyway.
No, but not in Game 1. It's really powerful in Game 1, and I think
I'm just picturing against the Cat Oven decks now. Sorry, I'm jumping too far ahead. Anyway, good luck this weekend, man. I'll be rooting for you in your Bant No Oko deck.
It's going to be exciting.
I look forward to seeing it, man. I'm already picturing you playing some sort of weird Field of the Dead deck without Field of the Dead.
You wouldn't be far off.
Awesome, dude.
I'll tell you about how I won a pizza for next week.
I look forward to it.
in life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge just for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind.